Hello and welcome to the Great Game Podcast, an Australian megagame podcast. This is episode 43, talking about Bound by Desire with Ben from BKGameDesign. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Pat. Just before we get into the main show, I just want to quickly shout out, if you are interested in megagames and chatting about megagame things, please join our Discord. We will have a link tree in the description, and we have a buzz of chatter about upcoming potential episode requests and things like that going on there. So we would absolutely love to hear comments or discussion points from you, anything you'd love to hear about, or things you hated from a previous episodes, anything like that. We'd love to hear. And without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Ben, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you back. Thank you so much for joining us again. Just for those who didn't hear the last episode that we had with you, who are you and what's going on in your world? What kind of stuff you've been up to?
I'm Ben Canellis, as you said. I'm a freelance game designer at night. And I have a number of credits under my belt: The Vampire the Masquerade Blood Feud, Councils of Aporia, most recently Touched by Darkness, and my latest project is Bound by Desire.
Yes, and we really wanted to chat to you about this one because I really loved the elevator pitch. Just quickly, how have things been going since we last spoke? Is Touched by Darkness doing well in the mega game world?
Yeah, I think there's a number of groups that are getting games together to run it here. Either they have run it or they have upcoming games. So, Touched by Darkness is live. You can grab it from the Game Crafter. It's a print-on-demand product. So, if you're interested in playing a mega game with the lowest barrier to entry, you can just go on and grab it. But I ran it at Gen Con. And the way Gen Con's submission window works is the moment you finish at Gen Con, you better start thinking about the next Gen Con to get stuff ready. So I left Gen Con after playing and running games completely revitalized and wanting to bite off another project and immediately start working on it. So I've been busy.
Yeah,
Awesome.
wow, very
Classic
busy.
Post mega game high.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, Ben, there's an episode that we've done recently, which isn't out as we speak right now, but it will be by the time this comes out. And we did get some feedback, and a testament to your ability to get Touched by Darkness out. A mega game friend in the community was quite spiteful, I think, in a respectful way, of how successful Touched by Darkness is at being that in the box, entry level, off the shelf game. So a bit of spite from a co-designer is definitely a compliment. And I'll leave the recording to come out for you to find out who it was.
I can't wait to hear this.
So, Bound by Desire.
Yeah. I was really interested to tackle this one because the theme is quite different to other mega games we've talked about. Did you want to go through the elevator pitch?
All right. I pull out my cane and spin it around, and away we go. Are you a fan of romance and romantasy? Titles such as ACOTAR, Twilight, Fourth Wing, and Bridgerton? Are you a shipper? Do you write fan fiction? Do you have an OTP? If so, this is the mega game for you. Become a character in a romance novel. Enter a world of fantasy and intrigue where you can court and oppose royalty, vampires, werewolves, fae, devils, and dragon riders. It's all there and more for you to tell your story.
Amazing.
Wow. You've just put everyone else to shame, and now whenever we have people on here, they're going to be very nervous about giving that pitch. Well done.
They need you want to come to the podcast in future, you better have a prepared speech.
The bar is set high. Ben, I wanted to ask you what makes this game unique, but I have a feeling you've kind of covered that in the pitch. I mean, this theme and the sort of what I'm guessing are the inspirations of the game are quite unique in my mind. I haven't encountered a mega game in this space quite like it. But what would you say, in your words, makes this game unique?
I entirely agree. The first hook is definitely the theming. There's so much of the wargaming background still left in the mega game sphere, and this is about as far afield from that as you can go. But likewise, I took inspiration from uh, the NSDM games and the play by email games, and sort of this is a much more freeform game than I think most other mega games tend to be. So very rules light, heavy on narrative. So the two things that really make it unique is the theme, and I'm sort of pulling from not the Model UN type expanded role, watch the skies gameplay template.
Hmm. And I think last time we spoke, you kind of touched on. I mean, last time we spoke about Touched by Darkness, you were working on this game then. At least it had conceptualized for you, and you mentioned it then. How, going back to before that point, how did you come up with this? What actually inspired this game, and why did you think this was a good idea to pursue?
I mean, the first thing I would say is this game is inspired by games I've played. I would like to shout the Omega play by email mega games, which have been a constant source of joy in my life. Some of the best role playing experiences I've ever had, and really opened my eyes to what you can do with a large group of players, almost solely focused on role playing. This year I played a NSDM, that's National Strategic Decision Making games. They've been hit or miss, and I played one in person for the first time in a long time, and had just an absolute great time. And so that sort of got the juices flowing. But then what really put it over the top was playing Goblin City, Scott McMahon's design. I helped play test it in a number of online implementations, but then when we ran it in person, it was just so sparkling and so alive. I was like, okay, like these games all sort of are in a similar vein. I haven't worked in this vein yet. I would love to work in this vein. And then when I was casting about for a theme, uh, there was an Omega mega game called God's Wars, where you all played the child of a Greek god, and it was set in sort of a Victorian England setting. And yes, you were sort of vying to ascend to godhood, but it was also sort of like a dating simulator. And that was the first play by email mega game that was specifically about romance, but these romances sort of bubble up spontaneously in almost every game. And I'm like, there is a lot of people looking for this type of experience. And I think it's completely underserved. Like when I look around there's a few tabletop role playing games that are based off of Jane Eyre novels and such, Pride and Prejudice and things like that. But with the large popularity of the genre, is like I just can't believe that there's not more experiences for people to sort of uh, go into this headspace of being flirty and dating and stuff like that. So
It's interesting to see that this has finally reached this space, because it's a theme that you can find in spades in like the tabletop role playing game world, which is always, and maybe I'm not going to speak out of too much expertise, but maybe even the LARPing space, which are areas which are very adjacent to making games. So it seems like a natural progression that we'd get there eventually based on our cousin hobbies.
Yeah, I was really excited to chat about this one when I saw that it was romance themed. And I think what you say about it never being a focus but like bubbling up, I think that's quite interesting because from what I've looked at and what I've researched, I think it's quite similar in the video game space and in other gaming spaces, is that it's very rare. Um, you know, I think a lot of like blockbuster RPGs have added, Baldur's Gate, all these games have added romance elements which almost end up kind of dominating the conversation, and that's all anyone talks about is the romance options and the different party members you can get with. So I think like there's clearly a big desire for it, but it's quite rare to see a big game that really focuses on it. How when you were kind of focusing on this theme, I'm curious how you decided to um, kind of navigate the stuff around player safety and tone and those aspects of it? I know you've got a tap out safety mechanic in the book, but can you talk a bit about how you decided to handle that? Because I think with a theme like romance, it kind of those elements have to come to the fore a little bit.
So yeah, I went back through the Omega games that the Mega Play by Email Mega Games and used them sort of as a template, and they usually set out like green, orange, and red content. Like green, like expect it to come up. These are the type of things that are going to happen. This is what you're expected to be okay with. Orange, you're tiptoeing around the line, but you should talk to the other players and do check-ins. And red is just verboten. Do not do things that's in red. So uh, I modeled I think it's like the third page of the rule book is like it's right up front. It's like these are the player expectations. This is what you're getting into because setting expectations is important. Like if you wait too late in the rules, players might not make it or they might not feel safe to sign up for something like this. So I wanted to set up a game where players are free to flirt and have a good time, and it's assumed that all players are potential partners with all other players, to sort of open up and expand that gameplay possibility, but also to specifically uh, set draw lines like this is not erotic roleplay. We are not going into the eroticism. It is purely the emotions and the flirtiness and like the pretend dating. And you are expected, if you are courting another player, to make some sort of physical demonstration of your affection, but this is not necessarily touch. You do not have to hold hands. You do not have to dance with other players. Like a wink or a thumbs up or finger guns, like will do the job. I want to make sure that players understand that we are allowed to use shorthand here in order to express affection for one another, and we are only supposed to express affection. We are not supposed to express it's not supposed. I believe that they call them closed door romances. Anything that's happening in the bedroom is behind a closed door. You will never see it. You will never hear it. You can understand that it is implied that it has happened, but like that is the implication is as far as we are going to go.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then in terms of getting the game to the table or the the convention center, have you play tested it at all? What's the plan for getting it through to be actually run?
So I borrowed liberally from Goblin City. So I was part of those playtests and helped run Goblin City, and I would say a large portion of the DNA is quite similar to that. So I'm confident in the bones of this. I have run an online playtest in a small scale, and that went well. And people were excited. And so on February 22nd, to hit near Valentine's Day, I'll be running my first in-person playtest with a full control team and a complement of players. We're about half sold out at this point. So, and by sellout, I mean just reserved. I'm running this for free in a library. So, I'm hoping we're going to start growing from there. I mean, the other half of this is Gen Con sort of launched Northeast Ohio Megagamers here in the States, and because we had space with the Mega Game Coalition to put up, advertisements for our gaming groups. And we haven't really run any games yet. It's just sort of been like we've been gathering people who are interested in mega games. I'm like, all right, let's get this community growing. I ran Touched by Darkness as a playtest last year. I'll run this a bit more official feeling and a bit larger scale and see if we can't start getting this community of people excited here in Northeast Ohio.
Mm. The free event in a local library is how I started things, I think. So it's a sure and tested way to get the community going. I'm curious, having not playtested it fully just yet, and not then run sort of the premiere run of the game. How have you done anything special or out of the ordinary to go about gauging interest in the game and finding out what the players want or expect out of a game like this? Because it's obviously quite a stretch for people who, if people came into the scene and like so many of us do in the past by watching the Shut Up Sit Down video, and they're like, oh, mega games in the local area, and they find something called Bound by Desire. It's probably a bit of a different taste to what they were expecting. Have you heard much? Have you got much feedback on it?
So I wonder if we are starting to enter into a post Shut Up and Sit Down entry point at this point.
I
And
hope
the video is a decade old at this point, and I know a lot of the people who are running and designing games in this space sort of came in at that, but there really isn't like I said, much of an established community here, and I've seen how well Omega was able to find groups of players that you would not normally see at an in-person game, and I'm like, there are people out here who are interested in this type of game. I just need to find them. So I've been posting out on the internet, and I've made flyers, and I'll be putting flyers up here around town, and I'm hoping that because I just know how popular romance novels are, that will get players who are interested in the theme more so than it being a mega game. And because it's so close to it, it leans so much harder into the role playing aspect as opposed to dudes on a map in any way. I'm hoping that players who show up, they're like, oh, I literally just write what I want to have happen, and we see what happens. Like, that is I'm hoping that's a small enough hurdle that players can get into the character and into the swing of the game itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, that's sort of what I was expecting when I had a look at the game rules. I was thinking this is it's kind of perfect for a new community because it's going to attract a unique crowd, both of mega gamers, but also, like you said, the people who are interested in the subject matter, which is probably an untested crowd for a lot
Right.
of more wargaming mega games.
The thing I've learned about mega gamers is if you put the word mega game on something, the people who are interested in mega games are going to show up. But
That's right.
if you're not growing your community, it's actually shrinking. That's just because people who are if you keep getting the same people showing up time after time after time, eventually those people will stop showing up and things will stagnate and things will calcify. So the only way to really continue to grow a community is to grab more people, and the way to grab more people is to find things that are adjacent and interesting to people to bring people along. So we'll fingers crossed. But the fact that we've already got more than enough people for this event to run in the first place, like at this point, like every person that shows up, like it makes it grow exponentially, because things that's the way things scale in mega games. But I'm excited to try and hit that max number.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sounds like a very good start. You were saying how closely it sort of overlaps with the role playing space, and you think that's where some of the crowd might start to filter in. And in the design that you've shared with us, you do this casting exercise, which is kind of like creating a character in some ways. Have you done that type of casting before?
So to specify. When players show up, they sort of are given an archetype, like the hothead or the socialite or something like that, and a very directional brief, but like it's just aiming the players in a direction without any specifics hung on to it. So like you're given the skeleton of a character, and this is a common practice that's very common in the Omega play by email mega games. They actually give the entire brief, the 2 or 3 sentence brief of like all 30 roles, and then you pick which roles are most interesting to you. You're most interested in. I'm not going to go that far, but like the idea is similar, and it works really well in those. Councils of Vaporeon, which I did earlier, also did something similar where players were assigned to a faction, but they named their character and they picked some sort of starting attributes. What I found is I'm a very strong believer in the IKEA effect, which is if you haven't heard of it, like it's sort of surmised that people feel closer to their IKEA furniture because they have to put it together. They've put some work into it, so they feel some ownership over it. And I know players breaking from the brief is a common problem in mega games. And what I found is if you give players some investment and let them make some choices and put some of themselves into the role that they're going to be playing, they tend to hew to it so much more strongly. Much more you get much richer characterization and interactions when players like, oh, I'm the mechanic of the icebreaker. What does that mean? As opposed to like, oh, I'm Lady McStuffin Face, and I love pastries and tea, but I have used them to poison my husband, and so I am a widow. Like that. People, when they've come up with those details themselves, they really want to play into it because they want other players to like find that out about them and know more about them.
Yeah, that makes
that's
sense.
Fantastic. I completely agree that adding that sense of ownership is really awesome. And yeah, I think I'm excited to hear about how this works in practice because I love the step as well. You've got in character creation that you choose some of your own stuff, like you choose assets and traits and things like that. And then you also end up getting a rival and a desire, one for each play. Like so, generating some emergent relationships right at the start, which I think is really cool. So the game is like very freeform and role playing, and we've kind of talked about that already. Can you talk about how this system works in action and how players do actions and try to do things in the game?
Sure. So the major driving force of this game are something called actions, and it's you print a bunch of these blank sheets out before the game as part of the prep, and whenever a player wants to do something in the game, they collect one of these action sheets and they fill out what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it, and then they bring that to their controller, and their controller reads through it and works with them on it, like, is this possible or does this have to be changed somehow? And then they set sort of a target number that the players are going to have to roll and any sort of requirements that the player is going to have to fulfill. So let's say a player wants to go hunt a dragon and they are some sort of courtly person. You might say, well, if you're going to hunt a dragon, you're going to have to find someone to join this action that knows where the dragons might be, and you're going to need some sort of dragon hunting equipment. And with that as a requirement, you send that player off, and they then have to go and talk to all the other players and try and find out if this action is possible and who would like to join with them. And once they've gathered those people, they come back. You gather some dice, you add some assets and traits to that, some modifiers, roll the dice, and see whether you succeeded or not. Rinse and repeat as the narrative moves forward and things sort of spin out from there. So it's very, very driven by the players.
Yeah, so I love how freeform and light it is. I guess my question is, it seems like it would be quite heavy on control in order to adjudicate all of these different freeform role-playing actions that kind of need to go through the facilitator team. Do you think that now, from your experience of other things like Omega and things like that, do you feel like that's true in practice? And if so, like, how do you navigate that?
So you are correct. It reduces the player to control ratio. 6-1 is probably your sweet spot. You can go up to 8-1 if necessary. But you're going to have one control for each faction of around 6 players. The thing, you have two limiting factors, however, in how many actions these controllers are going to be having to adjudicate. First of all, anytime you're creating requirements for these actions before the player's allowed to roll on it, you're literally setting the player off on a fetch quest. You are buying yourself time. So they'll come up to you with what they're trying to do, and depending on how quickly you want them back, you can set a higher or lower bar for what they have to gather to themselves before they can attempt this action. Secondly, there is a currency in this game called effort tokens that need to be spent to add dice to these actions. And at most, a player might get through 2 actions in a turn at most. And I've seen other games try to use this format and give each player 2 actions each turn, and that has a tendency of overwhelming the control team, because usually I've seen those games set up that the actions get submitted at the end of a turn, so then control has a resolution phase where they have to resolve. I have to resolve 12 actions in this next 6 or 7 minutes. I'm resolving them all at the same time. In this game, these actions sort of come to you as the players finish them. So, one, you're going to be resolving far fewer actions, and two, they are not hitting you all in a batch. You might be resolving a couple in the first couple minutes, have 5 minutes just to walk around and chat and check in with players, and then maybe another 2 or 3 near the end of the round. So, I have been keenly aware of the potential pitfalls that these sort of rules light, action resolution heavy type games can have, and I feel like I've taken the best elements from games that I've seen do it well, and that's what I've been modeled off of. So hopefully it's not overwhelming to the control, and if one controller has some particularly active players, other control are always there that they can step in and they can lend a helping hand.
Yeah, nice. That makes total sense. Yeah, I am really interested to hear about that in practice. It's one of the big things that I've kind of thought about working on my own rules light game is how do you handle things when it's when so much stuff has to go through control because it's so freeform. So yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. Let's talk a bit about this standing mechanic, which I think is interesting. It's so in the game you have a representation of your clout or power or social standing, which goes from -4 to +4. How does that, how does that affect the game, and what was the thought behind this mechanic?
So, when I was casting about, and this game, I wanted to feel, at least it started with a bit more of like a Regency romance feel, where standing is a very important thing. It was a scale from like 0 to 9,
Mm.
and I was using Becky's. I was modeling it after Becky's trope high popularity system, which had rules for vouching in it, or like moving people's popularity around. And when I play tested it in practice, uh, it tended to be a little bit one note, where like having high popularity or having high standing was the only thing that mattered, and players with low standing didn't necessarily want to interact with the system. So now it's a system that goes from negative to positive, and being negative is just as good as being positive. If you're positive, that means you're in good social graces. You can do things in polite society and people are paying attention to you. Whereas if it's negative, well, now you can do things an outlaw can do. You can hide things and you have criminal contact. So where players end up on the scale affects that. The higher someone's positive, the more power they have in polite society, and the lower someone's negative, the more fiendish they can get in uh, in these sort of rougher parts of the game world. But it's a fun little lever that control can pull, because if you're trying to do something underhanded, well, as one of the requirements for the action, you can say, well, you're going to need some people with some negative standing. And if they're a person that's part of a faction where all of their faction members have positive standing, you've just sent that person to go talk to a bunch of different factions and make a bunch of new relationships. So it's mainly a lever for control to pull to sort of direct players to other players.
Nice, that makes total sense. I really like that it is both good and bad. I'm very interested to hear how that works. Like when you get the chance to play it in practice. That sounds awesome.
You've also got in the game like these factions, right? That different people have membership to, and I think I put down in our notes this concept of the registry and the ranking board, which, if I understand, is sort of like a big corkboard in the physical space with the strings attached and people moving their their representation on the board around. Is that right?
Yeah, they're kind of representing two different things. The ranking board is kind of like standing, but for the factions themselves. So the higher your entire the more influential your faction is as a whole, the higher you will be on the ranking board, or the more dastardly you are as a whole, the lower you'll be on the ranking board. And your faction's leader gets additional effort tokens. So it basically empowers your leader to sort of do more things. Effort can be freely traded, so it basically gives those factions that are the most notorious or the most prestigious a bit more oomph in the game, and gives players a reason to sort of jockey their factions for position. The registry board is the cork board, and you've got that exactly right. It lists which factions each of the players are a part of. And at first, it starts with it just being a nice blank board with just the names by where those what factions they are. But as players start courting one another, you connect courting players with a nice red string, so players can see which players are potentially dating one another officially and in public. And then, if anyone gets married, you change that red string to a gold string, and you can see which players have been wed together. So, as the game develops these romantic polyhedrons of interest, so too will the board sort of become an amalgam of strings and relationships, and how players are interacting with one another, a sort of visual representation. Because one thing I found is that whenever players are dating, uh, it's obvious to those two players, but like many plots in megagames, they can go completely unnoticed by the rest of the group. And so, if you go to the board and you look and you're like, "Oh, Lady Sweet Cheeks and Mr. Bad Vampire are dating each other," I would have never have known that, but now I can totally understand why they're working together so constantly.
Right.
It'll sort of elucidate those types of things.
I love the visual as well. It's such a good visual to have in a mega game, and I quite like the contrast in the maybe it's the juxtaposition in this case, where a lot of people, when they see a corkboard with red string and connecting stuff together, they're not thinking about romances and marriages and courtship. So I quite like that. It's a bit of a flip of expectations there, but I can imagine this being quite a centerpiece spectacle for the game.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because mega games are all about alliances and factions and debating things and all that kind of thing. And a lot of those mechanics are very applicable to a big Regency romance game of like, oh, who's dating who's going around with who. Like those things do feel very mega gamey inherently to me. Yeah, I'm interested. So each player is a part of a different faction. They have their faction goals, and it's got in the rules that they also have their own secret goals. I'm curious, is there much tension between their secret goals and their faction goals? Is it likely for players to kind of go a bit rogue outside of their team, or is this a game where the teams are more unified and they're all together and they're all friends?
Spoilers.
Oh, spoilers. Well, maybe don't give us
No, but
any too specific details.
I can speak to it. When I wrote each of the factions, I thought to myself, well, what will differentiate these factions is some level of cohesion. So if you because there are players that show up that are looking strictly for a cooperative gameplay experience, and I'm like, well, if that's the case, I've got factions that are sort of built to be much more in tune with one another and everyone's sort of rowing in the same direction. Whereas I'll just say it out loud. If you're just looking to have intra-factional dispute amongst your cohort, join the Fae.
Ooh,
Okay, there you go.
exciting.
That's our scoop, our exclusive.
They are designed and set up to be a circular firing squad of they and they are written that a bunch of people will be coming to them and possibly asking them for help and favors, and they might do a lot of good or bad in the world if they could only focus on doing that instead of trying to one up the person that they're in their own faction that they're trying to outdo. So
Nice. Okay, I like that.
Awesome. I love the idea of doing that, the amount of conflict based on the team and based on who you sign up with. So you sign up for a certain amount of intra conflict, because that's something I've been struggling with in my own design, is that in LARPs and in these types of games, intra-factional conflict, I think, is often almost assumed. It's like part of the thing. But I guess in the size of a mega game, when it's a 6-hour experience and it's this big thing, you really want to make sure, like, if you've signed up for that with your friends and your team, and you just want to be friends with them, that you let players have that kind of experience.
and
Yeah.
to that point, like they do have, two very public or like public to them factional goals and only one private goal. So like all mega games, there's no winning and losing, and you get to decide your own success. So if you don't want to lean into a personal goal because it's putting you at odds with your buddy that you showed up with, that's fine. I'm totally fine with you ignoring that part of your brief, because you are already playing an archetype and you already have starting assets and traits that are sort of coloring you as a character in this world. Like I am setting the stage, but I am not pulling the puppet strings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
I thought there's a lot of other components that we could probably talk through, like the different types of resources and cards that the players get. If we did touch briefly earlier on how before the game they get a rival card, and the desire cards. But I'm just wondering, with the kind of the context that you've just given, I'm wondering if it might be useful to walk through some of what the game actually looks like when people are playing. There are these storylines, there's the courting and the marriage that you've touched on. Did you want to run us through how some of these factors you've just described actually come into play when people start playing through a turn?
Sure. At the start of each turn, you collect some effort tokens based off of your faction and who you are. So different factions get different collections of effort tokens. They are means, might, magic, and moxie. So means is how much money and influence you have. Might is your strength personally fighting, as well as your ability to work as a military unit. Magic is magic, and moxie is all of that pluck that you have, all of these romance characters seem to have. When you need to be lucky or things just turn up your way, you can apply some moxie to it. Those are the things that turn into dice when you are completing actions. So you have action cards that you can fill out and advance the story, and you're probably wondering, well, what's driving this story? Well, you have all of your briefs, which are going to set you at odds with the other factions or in alliances with the other factions, as well as we had hinted at earlier, these desire and rival cards. So at the beginning of the game, when you're creating a character, you also throw a couple cards into the deck with your name onto it as desire cards and as rival cards. And players will draw these out. And these are characters, these are other players in the game that you are specifically interested in romantically or interested in antagonistically. You get some small mechanical benefit for dating or marrying the person you desire. There are no mechanical benefits for the rivalry. I don't want them to get too too competition like, but it basically gives you other people that you're going to want to talk to and see what they're trying to accomplish. So if players haven't generated their own sort of goals and actions that they wanted out of that, each control is also running something that's called a storyline. And this is sort of meta narratives that are happening in the world. So this might be there's an invading army gathering on the border, or we've discovered a cave that seems to be full of riches and people need to go exploring, or anything that you can imagine happening within one of these fantasy worlds. And if you want to interact with that storyline as your character, you write an action and then you just note which storyline it's attached to, and you find the control that's running that, and then you can advance your part of the narrative in that storyline. So you are gathering people together, you're writing actions, you're resolving those actions, and sometimes you are running into complications. When players are resolving these actions, they're rolling dice, and whenever a 1 comes up, Control has the option of giving them a complication. And this is a narrative hurdle that as Control's way to sort of introduce conflict into that player's narrative. So were they exploring that cave and they rolled a couple of 1s while they were successful? Well, congratulations, you discovered some sort of ancient relic, but on the way you got your arm caught in a crevice and you broke your hand. It'll give you a numeric penalty until you overcome this complication. So then you gather people, just like you were an action to try and deal with the complication and remove it. So perhaps if I have a broken hand, I go talk to one of those fractious fae over there and find one who might have some healing magic and be willing to fix me up. So you're interacting with storylines, you're dealing with complications, all the while trying to flirt with the players that you desire and possibly oppose the players that you have rivalries with. The turns are about 18 minutes of action time long, after which it draws to a close. You gather with your faction to sort of discuss what happened and talk to your leader and plan for your next turn. After which we have there isn't a media team, but the leader of each faction is given about a minute or so to sort of make announcements to all the players in the room about what their faction is doing. And I'm sure that they will be trying to boast about their accomplishments to move themselves up or down on that ranking board. And as well as we have our wedding ceremonies at that time. So if 2 players have been courting for enough time and have gotten the blessing of their faction leaders, because remember, we are being very prim and proper here.
Of course.
It would do us no good to lower our standing and elope. We can have a wedding ceremony where we will ceremonial change their red string to gold, and everyone in the room will get to celebrate and clap and be happy at the couple's wedded bliss for as long as that lasts.
Wow. The theme is just so rich on the way that you've designed this. Like I can see on paper you could make this so mechanical, I suppose, and gamey, but the way that you've worked the mechanics into the theme is seems very slick.
I wherever possible, if I could cut a rule that wasn't serving the purpose of being as frictionless as possible for players to tell their stories, I cut the rules. And likewise, like the action cards, like I know it sounds like submitting an action is sort of complicated, but when you pull out one of the action cards, it literally just has the steps on here. It's like, fill out these first 3 things. Like, what are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? And what do you want? At that point, stop. Bring it to Control, and you'll literally come. It says on there, bring it to Control. Control will set the target difficulty and the requirements, and then it says, okay, now go find your contributors and co-signers. Here where they sign in, and then once you have contributors and co-signers, come back to your Control who signed off on this and get ready to roll dice. I do a lot of board gaming and board game design as well as this mega game design, and I think us in the mega game design world would do well to note things. Board games give players the information they need at the moment they need it, whereas I think a lot of mega games put all of the information in a handbook, which is wonderful. But those handbooks, if there's never enough copies to go around, and they're never in the player's hand at the moment they need it. So I'm hoping, much like I aimed for with Touched by Darkness, that when a player needs a piece of information, they can look at something that is near them or in their hand and be able to sort of know the next step of what they're trying to do.
It sounds wonderful. One thing I'm curious about is just with it being such a role play rules light vibe, is just communication and communicating what's going on and making sure everyone's on the same page. Just one thing I've thought about, at least with more rules light role playing mega games, is with a mechanical mega game, if a tank is in one space, then everyone can look at it and go, yeah, that tank is in that space. We all know it. It's got a hardcore mechanical consequence, etc. But with a role playing mega game, things are more open and free form. And I think that can potentially lead to people being confused and not on the same page. Like we think this team over here thinks we've successfully poisoned the well, and this other team doesn't realize that. And, you can have potentially control players being on a different page or things like that happening. Do you think that's a concern for this game? And yeah, if so, like what are your thoughts of how to tackle that?
So I'm aware of that element and have seen it happen before, and I'm hoping, and it's worked so far, but it's a small number of small sample size. The storylines really help make sure things don't necessarily fall through the cracks like that. If if I am the player, if I am the controller handing the storyline of the Magic Cave, then all actions that happen in the Magic Cave are coming through me, and so I know everything that's happening in that sort of corner of the story. Like I have seen things frequently happen when players do something, they go to control, and control adjudicates it, and let's say I've seen it happen a lot with the refinery ship in Den of Wolves as an example, where players want to blow up something with a refinery because explosives, it's always a thing, and they don't necessarily because there's not a control for every ship. They go talk to one controller who might not necessarily be paying attention to what's happening in the refinery ship, and isn't sort of responsible for the refinery players, and then they adjudicate something, and then the person, the control member that is sort of paying attention to the refinery ship is like, wait, you have to catch me up on this. With storylines, the idea is if it's happening to your story, the one that the narrative that you're handling, then you know about it. If it's happening to your faction, then you're the one resolving that action and you know about it. So hopefully the number of crossed lines is smaller. There's always the potential in games this size, with this much complexity and with this many narratives, with every decision being flying by the seat of your pants. But I don't know. Part of that is sort of the thrill of it.
Yeah, of course. Definitely.
So, obviously, we've talked a lot about where the game's at the moment, and you're about to step into a playtest phase. Is there anything that you are, I suppose, concerned about that you really need to test in this game, or are you feeling pretty confident in the design?
So the $1 million question, the sort of open-ended worry that I have about this theme specifically is when you get into a face-to-face interaction, will people want to flirt? uh, in these, play by email mega games, you have so much time to think, and it's so sort of mitigated by the barrier of like it's just a character who I'm writing in a character voice into an email to another character whose player I will never see, and like I have like just a mental vision of what that character looks like. I'm hoping that people can get into the spirit and the fun of wanting to pretend flirt to one another and read each other poetry and profess their undying love and sacrifice themselves to protect one another. But it remains to be seen if it takes a certain amount of courage to put yourself out there like that, even when you are sort of wearing the mask of a character as a way to protect one's own ego. So, of all the things that this playtest is going to elucidate me on at this time, the one that I'm the most interested in, it's not mechanical, it's not narrative, it's vibes. Like, will the vibes of a romance survive face to face player interactions. And so there's a lot riding on it, and we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to. My gut feeling is that will be successful because I feel like you're going to attract the people who are interested in that, just with the theme and the design of this game. But I
Oh,
can
fingers
imagine,
crossed. Fingers crossed.
yeah, yeah, it is definitely a different experience. Like I've played some of the play by email and didn't even engage in anything of this sort of theme, but it's still obviously much easier when things are in text and also when there's time to think and when you're not engaging with someone face to face. Even in sort of a geopolitical war game, mega game, or a war gamey mega game, it feels like it's for some people it's probably a little bit easier to pretend to be that bumbling politician or that filibustering kind of general at the war map than proactively flirting with another character for like in for lack of a better word, for a mechanical purpose. So I'm really curious to see how it goes, but I think it's going to be pretty successful. It's just about finding the crowd. Likewise, in the answer to this may be the same thing, but I'm wondering what you are hoping players will play this game and think, "Wow, that was this particular part of the game was amazing." What's that part of Bound by Desire? Do you think?
Because of the freeform sort of because it's so rules light, and because players get to drive their own narratives, uh, I have always found that the biggest stories that come out, that players want to talk about after the game is like the big thing that they did. And there are so many opportunities to shine and collaborate. And this narrative design gives everyone sort of the ability to have their sort of key moments. And the other part about this is that uh, I I'm always blown away by player creativity. In every mega game that I've played, people will do things that I didn't think of that sort of stretch my concepts of what you can do in a game and what could happen and where things can go. And uh, I think I wanted to make a game that sort of puts full faith in the players to like find these magic moments and make them happen, and mine that vein of player creativity to sort of give everyone that is there something to talk about in some interesting way. Like when I helped run Goblin City at Gen Con, I was not expecting the Myconid faction, which in Goblin City is a slightly legacy style game. I've been running and managing the Myconid faction for like over a year at this time. The Myconids ended up training up lobsters, giving them sentience, and then destroying their their sort of spore mother, their hive mind, the center of their hive mind, when they try to assimilate it with a dragon. And so the Myconid faction is gone. It is no more, and it will be replaced by these sentient lobsters in a future faction. I would have never come up with that. And I cared too deeply and held the Myconids too closely in my hand for that to happen. But the moment I opened up my hand and let the players run with it, they took it in a completely different direction that was so interesting and so delightful. And they put the spore hive mind into the dragon, we had players all around the room cheering and yelling, and I could have never scripted a moment like that. And so I'm hoping that by, like I said, setting the stage but not pulling the puppet strings, like the players will lead us to more moments like that I think that are just pure magic that I'll always remember. So
Yeah, I think you can always rely on players doing that, but in this particular game that you've put together, I think it's going to make that flourish. It's gonna yeah, you're gonna get a lot of rich stories out of this one.
And I'm curious if there are any other designers listening to this who are interested in making a game focused around romance or maybe something that is a bit more away from those wargamey themes. Do you have any advice for them, or anything you think is really good to focus on when making that type of thing?
So I love to see you had talked about your sort of mega game bugbears, and how so many games sort of fall into map, console, and something else. It's a very sort of standard form to it, and I'm so excited when I run across games that don't have that structure. When I made Councils of Aporia, that was like a oops all councils game, and when I look at when I look at Bound by Desire, I'm like, this is an oops all Wizard Wheezes game, and I think it worked. And I think if you're a designer who look at Goblin City, you can look at my game, you can look at the NSDM games, and they are sort of a template for a way to play a game that is role playing heavy without sort of the traditional sort of like three points of interest that a lot of mega games have. And I would just encourage you to look at games like that if you're interested in it, and always just think, like, always challenge the sort of traditional mega game structure, because like I said, mega games are great. Mega gamers will come to play the mega games, but like unless we are expanding and evolving and growing, we are in fact stagnating. So I'm always interested to see people push the boundaries. And hey, if you need playtesters, hit us up in the Mega Game Coalition group, Northeast Ohio Mega Gamers, Omega. Like, all of these are are groups that have discords, and there's fewer and fewer online games, and so I think there's more and more space for people to play test these days.
I really like the advice to always challenge sort of the default approach to a mega game. I like that a lot. I also like your oops definition, and I would challenge any designers out there, bring us the oops or Last Turn Madness game, because I would like to talk about that.
I think we've seen oops all councils, we've seen oops all war maps. I'd love to see like oops all science game or oops all espionage game, something like that. I'd love to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring
So-
it. I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
So with that aforementioned previous chat we've had, you've got a bit of infamy now, Ben, as being this producer of off-the-shelf mega games with Touched by Darkness. Are you hoping that that's what will happen with Bound by Desire, and once you've done the testing and you've got it out onto the floor and it's been successful, you'll be packaging it up?
Oh, 100%. I already the playtest that we're running on February 22nd. I'm using components that I ordered from the Game Crafter. So I already laid out the cards, did the artwork, did the graphic design, have it all in there. Another thing that I had kept in the back of my mind was Touched by Darkness came in at a higher price point that I wanted it to, but it kind of, based off of Den of Wolves, it necessitated sort of every component that's in there. Like there's no place for me to cut. Where with this one, I think it's gonna be hitting in at about an $80 to $100 price point. And now that doesn't have badges, and you have to do extra printing, on 8.5 by 11 paper, black and white for action sheets and storylines and stuff like that. But like the idea is like, hey, for hopefully close to half the cost, if you're looking for another one of these mega games, you can go up in there and you can grab it. So going forward, perhaps it's limiting. I like to think that necessity is the mother of invention. Is that the phrase? Or
I think so,
that,
yeah.
yeah, that like by having to work within the boundaries of the game crafter and aiming for that, I will find interesting solutions to things like that. But yeah, I think for me personally, because of my experience with the game crafter, the easiest way for me uh, to give back to the community through as a game designer is to put these things up in a form that anybody can play and have a very complete package that just shows up on their doorstep and they open up. Yeah, like I opened the package that showed up just this week, and I was like, ooh, these cards look great. I'm so excited to to
Awesome.
give these to players. They're so colorful. I think we in mega games get pretty used to some pretty bare bones looking type stuff, and I'm like, how far can I push this envelope of production value that you can get from just cards and such.
That's great.
That's extremely exciting. Awesome. Well, yeah, if people are excited and interested in learning more about Bound by Desire or playing in your playtest, what's the best place for them to go to find more info?
There's an Eventbrite listing for if you want to get a ticket to the one in Bay Village, Ohio. Just Google Eventbrite Bound by Desire. But for a more permanent way to sort of reach out and find me, I'm Ben K Game Design on Blue Sky, and you can also email me there. But I'm also in the Omega Discord server, in the Mega Game Coalition server, in Northeast Ohio's Northeast Ohio Mega Gamers Facebook as well as Discord server. I'm around. If you go to any of the spaces where mega gamers tend to congregate online and give me a shout, I will find you. Do not worry.
Awesome.
You're always
And
watching.
Yeah.
Hey, you can join this wonderful Great Game Pod Discord. I'm also in this Discord. If you shout me out there, I will hear you there.
I was going to give you shit about being like an affiliate of the Game Crafter or something, but if you're pulling our name out there too, that's okay. I'll allow it.
Listen, I'll chill for everyone and anyone. I
Yeah.
think it takes everyone rowing in the same direction to get more mega games out in the world. So, if you're an ally to that cause, consider me at your shoulder.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ben. That was absolutely wonderful, and really excited to see Bound by Desire go off.
Yeah, I am too. I'll post pictures.
Awesome.
We'll be watching intently. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful talking with you two again.